Welcome to day number 2 of week 2 of our year long look at the Bible, reading of the Bible. And today we are reading Genesis chapters 19 and 20. We're going to read Psalm number 1 and Mark chapter 7. So if you need to pause there and go back and read those, go for that and then pick us back up again. Chapter 19, we finished off in Genesis chapter 18, where Abraham is meeting with the angel of the Lord, or Jesus, however you want to pre-incarnate Jesus. And it ends with the Lord looking out from the valley into the valley and looking at Sodom and Gomorrah, and kind of says that he's going to go down and destroy it unless he can find 10 righteous people. And of course, we know that they could not find 10 righteous people in Sodom. The one righteous ones they can find is Lot, and that would be Abraham's nephew Lot. And so, and of course, Abraham and Lot, they've traveled together, they've worked together, and they had split earlier in the and gone their separate ways. But of course, they remain close. Obviously, we see that this relationship is a closer relationship. And so Abraham's kind of speaking to the angel or to Jesus, on Lot's behalf, and still they can't find the number of righteous people. So the angels came into Sodom and go to Lot, and of course Lot, he is a stranger, and this gets brought up in the deal that he is a stranger or a sojourner, an immigrant, if you will. In Sodom. And so these two men, they're angels, they're Jesus, whatever, but they are men, and so they come in and they go to stay at Lot's house, and the men of Sodom want to take advantage of these two men, for lack of, to make it a PG statement, and it does say there that and it goes to a point, really blatant point, that it says all of the men, not just some of them, not just one or two troublemakers. It's all of the men of Sodom come to attack these two strangers that are coming to stay at Lot's house, and Lot does something kind of interesting, and I don't know if I have a real great answer for it. When he offers his two virgin daughters, to be taken by these men, obviously to be raped and attacked and beat up. But it just kind of goes to show the evil that is going on in Sodom, and why God has come down to destroy them is because they're like, no, we don't really care about that. We want the two men. We want to attack the two men. And so, of course, they're able to get away, because you're dealing with Jesus, and Jesus is going to win every time, right? And that's a good example of that God's going to win every single time that he, when he wants to. And so they escape. And for me, the biggest lesson in all of this, story is it's an obedience thing. Because they tell Lot and his wife and their daughters and the two men that are engaged to be with the daughters to not look back. They get, it kind of goes back to the Adam and Eve thing. There's one rule, and to not look back. And so, but what does Lot's wife do? She looks back. And so it turns into a pillar of salt. So it's kind of an obedience thing. God gives you these little, seemingly innocent and seemingly small rules, to follow. Follow them. Follow them. It's fairly simple. And then we get this, kind of disturbing as far as our, modern day sensibilities, story of Lot with his daughters, and the daughters, becoming worried that they're not going to be able to have kids, because they're in the middle of nowhere and alone. And they sleep with their father on back. They get Lot drunk, and they take advantage, and they get impregnated. And of course, we read this now in the 21st century, and we kind of have have a hard time with that, with the whole incest thing. And of course, the Bible goes into that incest is not right, obviously, but you put it into the context of what these girls are doing. Is they just saw that their home and their home cities got destroyed, right? They watched both Sodom and Gomorrah get destroyed, and they're hiding out in this cave, and it's just the three of them, and they're scared. They don't know what's going on. For all they know, that the world has come to an end. Obviously, this is long, thousands and thousands and thousands of years before modern technology, so they don't know what's going on. That it was just Sodom and Gomorrah that were destroyed. So you can kind of see where it is. But I think it's another good example of that. Not everything that is written in the Bible is pretty, according to our modern day ideas and ideals. And so it's another good example of we have to read the Bible through the lens of the audience that it was written for. And so to the original audience, this probably would have made sense. Obviously it doesn't make sense to us, but we aren't in that situation. We weren't in that cave. So it's kind of an unsavory story as far as we're concerned now, but would have made sense in that day. And then we see another example of Abraham and Sarah. They're traveling, and they get into the Negeb and the kingdom of Gerar, and again, like they did in chapter 12 when they went to Egypt, Abraham has Sarah say that she is his sister, which we do see that they are half siblings. So it's not a complete lie, but also not the full truth either. And what I take from this chapter 20 and this story of Abraham and Abimelech is, Abimelech is obviously completely innocent, and it actually is, and is very generous with Abraham. By all rights, he could have done, gone, arrested Abraham or done whatever, but gives him all these, gives him these gifts and gives him these things, and to make amends and to appease God, because obviously God was not happy that Sarah was being handed off to the king Abimelech, and so he wanted to make amends with God as well. And so and then of course God pays him back as well. So just another, and we see Abraham, and we've talked about Abraham, he's one of the fathers of our religion. He's one of the, if we built a Mount Rushmore of characters, especially characters of the Old Testament, Abraham is most definitely one of those guys that's going to be on Mount Rushmore. But even he has these struggles, and he has these insecurities, and he's very human. And I think this is one of those stories where it really brings back the human element of Abraham, that he makes mistakes, and God still uses him. So that's kind of how I look at that. Then Psalm 1, the first Psalm, is just, it really sets up the Psalms in general. It kind of just, it kind of just gives us an idea of what the Psalms are going to be like. And it's a great, wonderful, happy Psalm, and, really kind of goes into this idea of blessed is, the first verses are fantastic. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners. Those that are following God are going to be doing all right. Those that follow the wicked, not going to be doing all right. So great Psalm, and a good way to start off the book of Psalms there. So Mark chapter 7, they've got two really good, interesting stories, and I'm going to be writing a little more deeper into these onto my Substack, and I'll post those here shortly. But the first part of the first probably half or so, first 23 verses of chapter 7 in Mark is dealing with traditions and commandments. And we see that the disciples are eating, and they either didn't wash their hands, or they didn't wash their hands properly. And the Pharisees, and they get upset by this, and they're questioning why. Why are they eating and not washing the way that they're supposed to? And really, this really kind of gets into that argument of the law and the salvation, salvation through the law, salvation through Jesus Christ. And Jesus kind of just basically says, the laws and the traditions don't mean anything anymore, because I'm the one that is taking care of that. And we see that in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, where he says, I didn't come to replace the law, I came to fulfill the law. And so really it's more about the traditions are fine and good, but it's a heart thing. And we talked about that yesterday too, that this is really more of a heart thing. Where's your heart at? We talked about that with circumcision, and how modern day, it's not we don't have to be circumcised to be saved, and we don't have to follow the laws of Moses anymore to be saved, because we have Jesus Christ. And so, and the biggest thing, biggest takeaway I get out of this is, Jesus basically says that all food is okay. It's not what we're putting into our mouths, it's what's in our heart. And, we can have all these laws, you can have all these rules and regulations. It's about what's in your heart. And that's kind of the big takeaway here. Again, I'm going to get much more into that in an essay on Substack. And then the second, big part of this one is the Syrophoenician women's faith. And this is another one of those, if you're looking for a great example of faith, this is it. Jesus and the disciples, they've traveled outside of Galilee. They've gone to the communities of Tyre and Sidon, which are right on the Mediterranean Sea, and they're not in the traditional Israel. So they've gone out of their homeland, home country, whatever you want to say, and they're there, and this woman comes up to them. She's a Gentile, and Jesus and she has a sick, a demon-possessed daughter, and she comes to Jesus to have him heal the daughter. And which that in its own right is a great example of faith. We saw that. It's kind of the same idea as the woman that was bleeding for 12 years. And we see that Jesus' answer is, and I'm going to read it, and this is verse 27. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." Now, that sounds very harsh. And when you look at it, this is him saying, he's here to see Israel first, right? And the dogs would be the Gentiles, which would be all of us non-Jewish believers. And she has such a fantastic answer. And she answers him, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." So even this small crumb amount of healing from Jesus is going to be enough to save her daughter. And Jesus, answers in kind and says, by your faith, she's healed. And takes care of it. So just a tremendous amount of faith for this woman to do that. And, and it's kind of a very small beginning of the ministry to the Gentiles. And again, I'm going to get much more into that in that essay on Substack. So make sure you check that out. So that kind of wraps up day 2 of week 2. Day 3, we're going to be reading Genesis 21, 22, and 23. We'll read Psalm 107 and Mark 8. So plenty of reading to do. So get that done, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.